Before we dive in, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to hear from you. Okay, let's go. The mirror that lied. It was supposed to be a fun day. Just me and my best friend Vanessa hunting for treasures at the annual flea market on the outskirts of town. The air smelled like roasted peanuts and funnel cakes, and the chatter of bargain hunters filled the atmosphere with energy. Vanessa had dragged me along despite my protests. "You never know what you'll find, Nina," she said with a mischievous grin. "Maybe you'll discover something life-changing." I rolled my eyes but followed her anyway. She was right. I needed the distraction. Work had been draining, and I'd been in a rut for months. We were wandering through rows of mismatched furniture and dusty knickknacks when I saw it. The mirror stood propped against an old wooden crate, its gilded frame tarnished with age but still beautiful. Intricate carvings of vines and roses spiraled around the edges, and the glass itself was spotless, almost unnaturally so. It drew me in like a magnet. I couldn't explain why, but the second I laid eyes on it, I felt something. "What's that saying about finding your reflection in unexpected places?" Vanessa teased, nudging me. "It's just a mirror," I replied, though my voice sounded hollow even to me. The vendor, an older man with a stooped posture and weathered hands, shuffled over. "Ah, you've got a good eye," he said, his voice raspy. "That piece is special." "Special how?" I asked. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "It's unique, one of a kind. Been in my family for generations. I'm only selling it because I need the space." I hesitated, but Vanessa nudged me again. "Come on, Nina, it's gorgeous. And you could use something pretty in your apartment." She had a point. My place was barren and lifeless, a reflection of how I'd felt lately. "How much?" I asked. The vendor named a price so low it felt wrong, but I handed over the cash without question. The mirror looked perfect in my living room. I hung it above the fireplace, its ornate frame giving the space a touch of elegance I didn't know it needed. For the first few days, it was just a mirror. I'd catch my reflection as I walked by, sometimes pausing to adjust my hair or makeup. Vanessa came over once and jokingly called it Nina's new obsession. But then, things started to change. It was subtle at first. I'd glance at the mirror and think something looked off. My reflection wasn't quite right. Maybe the tilt of my head didn't match the way I'd moved, or my expression seemed a split second out of sync. I chalked it up to overthinking. Maybe I was tired. Maybe the glass had a slight distortion. But then I saw it. One night, as I was settling onto the couch with a glass of wine, I glanced at the mirror and froze. My reflection wasn't sitting on the couch. It was standing, staring at me. The glass of wine slipped from my hand, shattering on the floor. My heart pounded as I scrambled to my feet. But when I looked again, everything was normal. My reflection mirrored my every move perfectly. I laughed nervously, trying to convince myself it had been a trick of the light. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The next time it happened, there was no denying it. I was brushing my teeth, staring absent-mindedly into the mirror, when I saw a shadow move behind me. I spun around, but the bathroom was empty. When I turned back to the mirror, my reflection was smiling. I wasn't. I stumbled out of the bathroom, my chest tight with fear. That night, I barely slept, my eyes fixed on the bedroom door as if expecting something, or someone, to step through it. The visions grew more frequent after that. The mirror began showing me things that hadn't happened yet. At first, they were small and innocuous. I saw myself dropping a cup of coffee at work, and sure enough, it happened the next day. I saw Vanessa surprising me with tickets to a concert, and 2 days later, she did. But then the visions turned dark. One night, the mirror showed me standing in my apartment, covered in blood. My hands were trembling, and there was a knife on the floor at my feet. I screamed and covered the mirror with a sheet, but the image stayed burned in my mind. I tried to ignore it. I avoided the living room entirely, spending my nights locked in my bedroom. Vanessa noticed something was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her. How could I explain that I was being haunted by a piece of furniture? But the mirror wouldn't let me ignore it. Even with the sheet covering it, I could feel its presence. Whispers began to echo through my apartment, soft and insistent. "Nina?" The voice was my own. Desperate for answers, I went back to the flea market, but the vendor was gone. The other sellers claimed they'd never seen anyone fitting his description. I turned to the internet, searching for any information about antique mirrors and strange phenomena. What I found only made things worse. Stories of cursed mirrors were everywhere. Mirrors that trapped souls. Mirrors that acted as portals to other realms. But one story stood out. A legend about a mirror that didn't reflect reality but dictated it. I slammed my laptop shut, my hands shaking. The final straw came a week later. I woke up in the middle of the night to find the sheet ripped off the mirror. The image in the glass wasn't my apartment. It was a dark, empty void. And in the center of that void, something moved. A figure stepped forward, its face obscured by shadows. But I knew instinctively that it was me, or something pretending to be me. It raised a hand and pointed at me, and my reflection disappeared. I don't remember much after that. I know I ran. I know I ended up at Vanessa's place, pounding on her door until she let me in. When I finally told her everything, she didn't laugh. She didn't call me crazy. "We need to get rid of it," she said, her voice firm. The next day, we drove to a remote clearing in the woods. I smashed the mirror into pieces and buried the shards, hoping that would be enough. But even now, I'm not sure. Sometimes, when I catch my reflection in a window or a puddle, I think I see it. The shadowy figure, watching me from the edges of the glass. And I can't shake the feeling that one day it'll step through. The curse of the abandoned prison. There's something intoxicating about the forbidden. That's how all of this started, really. It was Jordan's idea. He always had a knack for talking us into things we probably shouldn't do. "It's just an old building," he said, leaning back against his car with that crooked grin of his. "The stories are just stories. Unless you're chicken, Theo." "I'm not chicken," I replied, rolling my eyes. "You're totally chicken," said Diana, smirking as she adjusted the straps of her backpack. She was the daredevil of our little group, always chasing the next thrill. "Fine," I said, annoyed. "Let's go. But when we get arrested for trespassing, I'm blaming both of you." The abandoned prison sat on the outskirts of town, its looming silhouette half hidden by gnarled trees and the encroaching fog. Once known as Blackridge Penitentiary, it had been closed for decades after a fire destroyed a wing of the building. Jordan's flashlight beam cut through the darkness as we approached the rusted gates. "See? Not so scary," he said, though his voice wavered slightly. Diana snorted. "It's just a building. What's the worst that could happen?" That was her thing. Tempting fate. I hated it, but I wasn't about to back down now. The interior of the prison smelled like mildew and rot, a mixture of damp stone and decaying wood. The walls were covered in graffiti, some of it crude, some of it cryptic. "What's that supposed to mean?" Diana asked, pointing at a scrawled phrase that read, "They never leave." "It's just graffiti," Jordan said, though his voice was quieter now. The air felt heavier the deeper we went. Every sound, our footsteps, the creak of old metal, echoed unnaturally, as if the prison itself were alive. We reached the central cell block, a cavernous space with rows of rusted bars stretching upward. Jordan shone his flashlight into one of the cells, illuminating a small wooden bench and a rusted toilet. "See? Nothing but empty rooms," he said, trying to sound confident. But as his flashlight moved, I could have sworn I saw something. A shadow shifting at the edge of the beam. "Did you see that?" I asked, my voice tight. "See what?" Diana asked, turning to look where I was staring. I thought I saw something move." "Probably a rat," Jordan said, though he didn't sound convinced. As we moved deeper into the prison, the whispers started. At first, I thought I was imagining them. Soft murmurs that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. But then Diana stopped dead in her tracks. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. "Hear what?" Jordan asked, though I could tell he was on edge too. "Voices," Diana said, her eyes darting around, like whispering. Jordan forced a laugh. "It's just the wind. Old buildings make weird noises." But I knew it wasn't the wind. The whispers sounded like words, though I couldn't make them out. And they were getting louder. The first truly terrifying moment came when we reached the cafeteria. The room was massive, with long tables and benches overturned in disarray. Diana moved toward the serving counter, her flashlight beam revealing a row of rusted trays. "This place is creepy as hell," she muttered. Suddenly, the door behind us slammed shut. We all jumped, spinning around to face the noise. "Okay, that's not normal," Jordan said, his voice cracking. I ran to the door and tugged at it, but it wouldn't budge. "It's stuck," I said, my voice shaking. "No way," Diana said, joining me. She tried pulling it too, but it didn't move an inch. That's when the whispers turned into laughter. It echoed through the cafeteria, a low, mocking sound that sent chills down my spine. Jordan backed up, his flashlight darting around the room. "This isn't funny," he said, as if someone was playing a prank on us. But no one was there. The laughter grew louder, more distorted, until it sounded less like a person and more like something else. And then the shadows began to move. At first they were subtle, dark shapes shifting at the edges of the room. But as we watched, they grew more defined, taking on vaguely human forms. Diana grabbed my arm. "What the hell is that?" she whispered. "I don't know," I said, my voice barely audible. One of the shadows moved closer, its form elongating unnaturally. I could feel cold air radiating from it, as if it was sucking the warmth out of the room. "We need to get out of here," Jordan said, his voice panicked. "No kidding," Diana snapped. We ran, bolting out of the cafeteria and into the nearest hallway. The shadows followed, their distorted forms slipping through the walls and floors like smoke. Every door we tried was locked. The whispers were everywhere now, louder and clearer. "You shouldn't be here. They never leave. Join us." We finally found an open door and stumbled into what looked like the warden's office. The room was eerily intact, as if untouched by time. A desk sat in the center, papers scattered across its surface. Jordan slammed the door shut behind us, shoving a chair under the handle. "What the hell is happening?" he demanded. I don't know, I said, trying to catch my breath. Diana picked up one of the papers on the desk. This place? They used to execute prisoners here, she said, her voice trembling. The worst of the worst. The temperature in the room plummeted. Frost began to creep across the windows. The shadows seeped under the door, coalescing into a single massive figure. It didn't have a face, just a void where its features should have been. It reached out, and I felt an overwhelming sense of dread, as if every happy memory I'd ever had was being stripped away. "Run!" Diana screamed, yanking the chair away from the door. We sprinted back into the hallway, the figure looming behind us. The prison began to change around us. The walls were no longer crumbling. They were pristine, blood-stained brick. The air filled with the sounds of chains clinking and distant screams. We weren't in the abandoned prison anymore. We were in its past, reliving its horrors. I don't know how we made it out. The last thing I remember is bursting through the front gates, the whispers still echoing in my ears. We never talked about what happened that night. Jordan and Diana moved away, and I haven't seen them since. But sometimes, late at night, I hear the whispers again, and I know the prison isn't done with me. The Bridge to Nowhere. It was supposed to be just another urban legend, a campfire tale spun out of boredom and the human need to explain the unexplainable. I'd heard about the Bridge to Nowhere from some locals while grabbing coffee on a solo road trip through the Pacific Northwest. According to them, it was deep in the woods, forgotten by time. People claimed it wasn't on any map and had no practical use. More ominously, anyone who crossed it at night supposedly vanished. Forever. Of course, I didn't believe a word of it. Come on, these stories are everywhere, I told myself. A classic small-town scare tactic to keep kids from wandering off. I've always been a skeptic. My name's Chris, by the way. Chris Thompson, a freelance journalist with a knack for debunking myths. I'd spent years chasing down ghost stories and strange phenomena, and most of the time they led to nothing more than a creaky floorboard or overactive imaginations. But something about the way the barista described the bridge stuck with me. Her eyes darted around the room as if someone might overhear her, and she leaned in closer when she spoke. "If you really want to find it," she whispered, "head up Route 47. Look for the old logging trail. But don't go at night. Whatever you do, don't cross the bridge after dark." I found myself hiking up that trail later that afternoon, the sun filtering through the dense canopy of trees. The air was cool and damp, and the only sounds were the crunch of leaves under my boots and the distant call of birds. It wasn't long before I stumbled upon it. The bridge was exactly how they described it, weathered and ancient, with planks that looked ready to collapse at any moment. Moss clung to the wooden beams, and vines twisted around the rusted metal railings. On either side, the dense forest swallowed the view, making it impossible to see where the bridge led. I hesitated for a moment, struck by how out of place it felt. It wasn't connected to any path or road. It simply stretched across a narrow ravine, the bottom of which was obscured by mist. "This is it," I muttered, pulling out my phone to snap some pictures. It was just a bridge. Nothing special, nothing terrifying. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the forest floor. I should have turned back then, but curiosity got the better of me. I waited until the moon rose high in the sky, bathing the forest in a pale, eerie light. My flashlight flickered as I approached the bridge, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the air had grown colder. The first step onto the bridge was uneventful, aside from the groaning protest of the old wood beneath my weight. I took another step, then another. Halfway across, I stopped and looked over the edge. The mist below seemed to glow faintly, swirling like something alive. I tried to focus on it, but my eyes couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. A sudden noise behind me made me whip around, a twig snapping, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps. "Hello?" I called, my voice echoing into the trees. No answer. When I turned back toward the other end of the bridge, my heart stopped. The forest was gone. Instead, the bridge now led to a town that looked strikingly familiar. I stepped forward cautiously, my breath fogging in the suddenly cold air. The houses were eerily similar to the ones in my own neighborhood back home, but they were distorted, as if they'd been pulled from a nightmare. The windows were too large, their frames warped. The streets were silent, devoid of life. The air smelled of rust and decay. I stepped off the bridge, my instincts screaming at me to turn back, but something compelled me forward. "Hello?" I called again, my voice trembling. From somewhere nearby, I heard the faint sound of laughter, childlike and hollow. I wandered through the empty streets, my flashlight casting long, jittery shadows. Every house seemed to watch me, their dark windows like eyes. I kept expecting someone to step out onto a porch or peek around a corner, but the town remained lifeless. Then I saw it, a figure standing at the end of the street, silhouetted against the dim glow of a street lamp. "Hey!" I shouted, running toward it. As I got closer, I realized it wasn't a person at all. It was a mannequin, its plastic face twisted into a grotesque smile. A chill ran down my spine as I noticed more of them, hidden in windows and doorways. They were everywhere, their lifeless eyes fixed on me. The laughter returned, louder this time, echoing through the empty streets. I spun around, trying to pinpoint the source, but it seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Who's there?" I demanded, my voice breaking. The mannequins began to move. It started with a twitch, an arm jerking, a head tilting unnaturally. Then they began to step forward, their stiff legs dragging across the pavement. I ran. I didn't know where I was going, only that I needed to get away. The laughter grew louder, distorted into something inhuman. I turned a corner and found myself back at the bridge. Relief flooded through me as I sprinted toward it, but as I reached the edge, I froze. The bridge was no longer there. The ravine stretched out before me, the swirling mist below now churning violently. "Please," I whispered, my breath hitching. "Please let me go." The laughter stopped, replaced by a deafening silence. When I turned around, the mannequins were gone. The town was gone. I was back on the bridge, the familiar forest on either side. My legs felt like jelly as I stumbled across, collapsing onto the trail. The sun was rising, casting a warm glow through the trees. I looked back one last time, but the bridge was gone. I don't know how I made it out, but I did. To this day, I can't explain what happened. I've tried to tell people, but they look at me like I'm crazy. Maybe I am. But sometimes, late at night, I swear I can still hear the laughter. You've braved the darkness with us. Subscribe and keep the spirits at bay. Until next time, sleep if you dare.